Okay. Hi. Hey, Kevin.
How's it going?
I'm great. So, guys, I just gave Kevin a brief introduction. I told him this was our first episode, and let's jump right into it. So, so Kevin. So I met Kevin when we were working at Smart Cow, and the first time I heard from him, I think he was somewhere in London, and it turns out he was traveling the world and working as a developer at the same time. So the crux of this conversation is just me having an excuse to talk to Kevin about how it went, how it was, and yeah, that's basically it. So hi, Kevin. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is fun. It's awesome to be here. I think actually, before we get into the traveling part, it'd be interesting to back up to there's kind of an interesting story on how I even started working with Smart Cow in the first place,
Sure,
which
sure.
is just a crazy random coincidence on the internet. I published a small piece of code when I was in grad school on how to connect a very specific type of machine vision camera to OpenCV because no one else had done this. And whenever I'm doing computer problems, I definitely get annoyed a lot at things that should have been solved that just apparently aren't.
Hmm.
So I posted this, and I don't know, I didn't think anyone ever really read it. It was kind of obscure. And then 4 years later, Smart Cow reached out needing to do this exact same thing and asked if they wanted my help. And that kind of set off this chain of events that eventually led me to meet you, which is just wild.
Yeah, I know, right? So I actually got acquainted with SmartCow in the same way. I had a small GitHub repository, and Andrew Trask, he is a prominent figure in deep learning. He happened to star my repo, and then Ravi saw it, and he was like, "Okay, can you build this?" And then we ended up working together. So mine was a similar story.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so if I remember correctly, you also had that another repo on your GitHub. It was a really popular one with a Mario Kart one. Was it that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I did a little project called, I called it Tensor Cart.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was using deep learning to train an AI to play Mario Kart from
Hmm.
watching a human play.
Oh, yeah.
And that was actually another thing that I did kind of out of like, how does this not exist yet? Because I've seen there's a lot of posts online about various machine learning has
Hmm.
exploded, of course.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a lot of examples,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of examples like pertaining to video games.
Hmm.
But a lot of the time, the way it was presented was just kind of the output or just
Yeah,
algorithm and the math. No
yeah.
one had really done like an end-to-end example. And I knew from having worked on this in research that 90% of your time is spent on the other stuff. You spend a bit of time optimizing the actual machine learning algorithm, but you spend so much effort trying to like get the data into it,
Hmm.
like format it right, get it all working, get the data out of it. And actually for that project, the hardest part was by far getting being able to like spoof a fake joystick that the emulator would actually respond to. I had to write a C plugin to the N64 emulator to let I had like a Python web server that this C plugin called out to, and the Python web server was running the deep learning stuff. And that's how I cobbled it all
Oh,
together. But I hadn't written C in a very long time.
wow.
And honestly, I'd probably never written C in like a program that big before because I pretty much quickly moved to C++, right? Like you learn C once in
Yeah,
school, and then
yeah,
you usually go on to C++ pretty quickly.
yeah.
So I never really worked on a big C application. It's kind of scared, but it actually turned out to be super good, and it kind of made me question like how far have we really come with some of our modern languages? Because this C program was pretty well structured after I
Hmm.
figured out a couple things,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that was pretty funny. It was an awesome project, and
Yeah, yeah.
the other reason why I really wanted to do it is because I'd done a bunch of machine learning and then I moved away from it for a while. And then TensorFlow came out and everyone was talking about it. And I kind of wanted to understand what all the rage was about.
Hey, so wait, so you were working in this space before TensorFlow was a thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, so
yeah. When I did my master's, TensorFlow wasn't out yet. We had scikit-learn was available. So a lot of people use scikit-learn. A lot of people still use MATLAB for various
oh,
stuff.
uh,
I ported a lot of code out of MATLAB. OpenCV was transitioning from plain C to C++, and it was a huge pain because almost all the documentation online referenced the old way, and it was this like stuff was kind of halfway in between, which is it's funny now because that's gone now. If you search
Yeah,
online for
exactly.
OpenCV help, you
Yeah.
definitely just find new stuff. But
Hmm. Hmm.
that probably I don't know off the top of my head, I would say like 2 to 3 years for that to kind of like fully like sweep itself out.
So what year was this in? The opens. Yeah.
That would have been my master's was 2011 to 2013, and then I think TensorFlow kind of came out in like 2013 or 2014 or something.
Oh, I see. So you are like the grandfather because right now, when anyone builds anything, we just have some. I think it is fast.ai, that is a popular repo, and then we have some OpenCV code, and PyImage search has already built most of the tutorials. So you just connect all of these pieces together like Lego blocks, or you just use AWS, GCP, or Azure, and you just connect these things together, and boom, you have an app. And it is that easy now, and it is very surprising you were here before all of that was a thing.
I mean, to be honest, it kind of felt that easy before. It's just the
Hmm.
blocks were different.
Oh,
So that's kind of
yeah.
wanted to look at like TensorFlow because they're talking about like deep learning. I'm like, I already had like one line create neural network Go code back then.
Oh.
Like, what's different? What's TensorFlow actually doing? And I think really what TensorFlow is doing is it's the scalability of it. It's the ability to run it on like one machine or like a whole cluster and then like deploy it back to a smartphone. So it's really just like
Oh,
an
yeah.
upgrade in the tooling, but
Yeah.
the fundamentals are still there. And I've given a couple talks on neural networks, and I like to talk back to the guy who invented them, who
Huh.
physically wired it on a board, which is
Oh.
just bonkers. There's like this picture, and he has this like rat nest of wires everywhere. And this is the first neural network that I think it produced. It ended up simulating like an and or an or logic gate, but it
Huh.
was trained through back propagation with like an actual
Oh.
circuit. And it's just like, could you just imagine like the patience that someone must have had to do that? Like I get mad when like my one script fails on some typo. I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell? This guy wired a whole neural network somehow.
Yeah. And the surprising part is ki embedded stuff is so difficult. You can't save anything. You don't have version control, and you just have real stuff, and you have to wire it together. It's pretty difficult, right? I mean,
Totally.
yeah, yeah. And go on. Sorry.
I was gonna say I've been thinking back a lot about my time when I was in university doing
Hmm.
more like a lot less software, a lot less big software, but
Hmm.
software was always a component. So there'd be
Hmm.
like sometimes a mechanical component
Hmm.
or an electrical component
Hmm.
and a software component.
Hmm.
I actually
Hmm.
think this might be really where I learned to debug properly because when the problem might not be the software at all and like a
Yeah.
flaky
Yeah.
connection, you
Yeah.
just have to be that much more on point with how you're debugging things.
Hey, so you reference back to your university days quite a lot. So, in your case, was it really helpful for you, the university? Uh,
Um, yeah, I think it was. I don't think it necessarily was things that I learned in
hmm,
classes. It's
hmm,
just, I guess I'm kind of just nostalgic for when I learned all this stuff. It just seemed really fun. Like I've been a professional for almost 10 years now, and like
yeah.
definitely parts of being a professional are fun, but parts of
Hmm,
it are just work.
hmm,
And when I think back to those early days, and that's like the smart cow kind of stuff and
hmm,
the machine
hmm,
learning kind of stuff, it all just
hmm,
reminds me of that.
hmm,
Like, oh man,
hmm.
they're good times.
Yeah. So, what was your timeline like? So you were in university, and
Mm-hmm.
then you were working on these machine learning thingies, and after that, there was a point where you decided ki you wanted something else. How did that change come out to be?
It was actually kind of random, really. I
Hmm,
came out of university with um, like a pretty solid base in programming and like data analysis and machine learning
hmm,
kind of stuff. But
hmm.
my undergraduate degree was actually in mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure how employable I was, and applied to a bunch of jobs, mostly as kind of a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, which
Hmm,
as a profession that was kind of new at the time. Like big
hmm.
companies suddenly
Of
wanted
course.
machine learning practitioners,
Hmm.
which I think really worked in my favor because everyone was interested in it. They just kind of assumed that if you were applying to these jobs or knew anything about it, then you must be smart.
Yeah.
And the job I ended up getting and accepting was just in web development. But I think they were just like, I mean, I was good at that job. I did
Yeah.
get good at that job. But
Yeah.
there was totally a component where they're just like, whoa, this dude does machine learning and seems to know about it. Like, he must just be good at all things computer. Like, no. but worked out, and I was able to learn how to become a web developer quick
Hmm.
enough to not
Hmm.
get fired.
Hmm. Hey, so you also started working on Ruby on Rails, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did that happen to be? Because right now Ruby, everyone is just JavaScript, JavaScript, and JavaScript, and the Ruby stuff, it is in the on the back burner, but the jobs are very important because software has already been built and they need someone to support it. So how did that happen? How did you pick Ruby instead of?
Um, well, I mean, at the time,
Hmm,
kind of like when I was looking for a job
hmm,
around 2013,
yeah,
Ruby was still like pretty new and hot at that time.
yeah, I
JavaScript
think
hadn't
so.
really
Yeah. Hmm,
taken off yet.
hmm, hmm,
And I mean, I would actually argue that like JavaScript exploded, but then like exploded beyond what we needed it to. And there's
yeah,
actually kind of been like a big like crawl back to realize that some server-side rendered stuff is pretty awesome.
yeah.
And like Rails can actually be performant if you do it right. Like
Oh.
anything, right? You got to do it
Hmm.
right.
So what happens? Can you just we are going on tangents here, but we don't
Yeah.
mind. So okay, so between Rails and JavaScript, I have never touched Rails before. So what are the big differences between them?
Um, there's a lot of differences. Well, it's kind of just like a difference in architecture,
Hmm,
and it's a question of how far you can get your app before you
hmm,
need really, really rich client
hmm,
experience.
hmm,
Because at some point, you definitely need full-on JavaScript for like a really, really rich client experience.
hmm,
Like something like
hmm,
Google Maps, you could
hmm,
never
hmm,
do server side.
hmm, hmm,
But a lot of other things you definitely can.
hmm, hmm,
And even the interactivity of it. I mean, the basic difference is that with a Rails app, every time you follow a link, you're loading
hmm,
a whole new page, and there's kind of
hmm,
some stuff associated with doing that.
hmm,
But you can work around that and give very much the same experience.
hmm,
So it kind of just depends on what your app's architecture really is.
hmm,
It's
hmm,
really dependent on the app what makes the
hmm,
most
hmm,
sense.
hmm,
Because there's totally times when a heavy single page JavaScript application makes a lot more sense
hmm,
and keeps your whole
hmm,
stack a lot simpler.
hmm,
Some of the stuff we were doing with Smart Cow very much
hmm,
tied into
hmm,
that because we
hmm,
had like heavyweight deep learning services that
hmm,
already had established APIs that we weren't going to change, and we
hmm.
needed to tie a bunch of these things together.
Yeah, yeah,
So we could
exactly.
either put that all in one server side app and then we have
Yeah,
like a whole chain of servers,
yeah,
or we kind of have like a shorter chain of servers and the client ties a little bit more together.
yeah.
I think where I'm talking about the backlash is a lot of more enterprise software kind of went this way
Uh,
too, because
yeah,
everyone was talking about JavaScript
yeah,
everywhere, right?
yeah.
And when you have an enterprise application that for the most part
Hmm.
has, it's like a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah,
It's got
exactly.
lists of things. You're going to create rows, you're going to
Hmm,
update
hmm,
rows, you're going to
hmm,
delete rows.
hmm,
The overhead that you go through to
hmm,
do all of that in JavaScript
hmm,
instead of just doing it server side,
hmm,
the trade-off's not really going in your favor there. At least
hmm.
that's the way I see it, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really depends on the
Makes sense.
individual thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Rails
Hmm,
too, there's a lot of magic in Rails, or
hmm,
people call it magic. It does a lot for you,
hmm,
and the framework has a lot going on.
hmm,
But if you know it, you can
hmm,
build stuff really fast, and you don't have to solve that many problems again, which is
hmm.
pretty awesome.
Huh. So I worked a tiny bit with Rails, and it seems ki Rails had the generating code stuff before JavaScript did. So Rails was, doing the generate your own pins thing. So there was a pins tutorial, Pinterest tutorial, which I was doing once, and it had, CRUD scripts built in. So you just had to type a little bit of code, and it generated everything off the backend for you. So yeah, it was pretty cool actually. Hmm.
Yeah, the abstraction over the database that you get with Rails is
Hmm.
fantastic, and that's really just what makes it such a good tool for building an
Hmm.
application that is going to have
Hmm.
a lot of CRUD type data.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Yeah, yep, makes sense. So, okay, so going back to our original point, how
Mhm.
did you decide ki you wanted to travel? I mean, how does one just up and leave with everything he has? How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was something that I'd kind of always wanted to do.
Hmm,
I don't really know what the like the first thing that kind of implanted this
yeah.
idea in my brain was.
Hmm,
I guess I traveled a lot as a kid. We always did like one family vacation a year.
mm,
My father actually had a job transfer to London, England
mm.
when I was quite young.
Oh,
So I lived in London, UK until I was about 4.5. I barely remember it. Maybe it started there,
yeah,
probably not. I remember a couple like university was interesting though, because I never chose to go on an exchange, which is one of my kind of biggest regrets.
yeah.
But I had a couple friends who did, and friends who moved away afterwards. And a
Mm,
couple of people went and taught English in Korea, and that kind of sounded like a really cool experience to me. That might be one of the first ones that kind of really
mm,
got me thinking that I wanted to get out there and explore. I
mm,
also had a couple other pretty cool opportunities to travel while I was in grad school.
mm, mm.
One time I got to bring our research to India and tour around a couple of universities and present it there. So that was
Oh,
really fun.
oh. So you were in India. So you were in Mumbai, Delhi.
We went to Delhi is where we flew into,
Mm.
and then we went up to IIT Kanpur was our first school.
Oh,
They
yeah,
were actually the ones who invited us to India,
yeah.
and then after they had invited us and we'd agreed to go,
Mm.
they ended up putting us in contact with BITS Palani, another school.
Oh, yep.
And then I think the two of them ended up like sharing the costs of bringing us over to India. So then we went to BITS Palani afterwards and did another
Yeah.
demo there. This was all in we call it Reading Week here,
Mm.
like Reading Week, Spring Break, and
Mm.
all the schools were
Oh.
having these festivals
Mm.
with a
Mm.
bunch of presentations, and
Mm.
the students at the schools were presenting a lot of their projects,
Mm.
and they brought in
Mm.
some guests.
Mm.
It was quite cool. I went, and before I jumped on the call, oh, you don't have screen sharing. I was going to show. I have a couple of pictures from.
That's okay. We can do something. Just explain me what I should do. What should I do? Um,
Um, I think if you just look at the meeting settings and just enable participant screen sharing, I should be able to
uh,
show you just pictures.
yep,
It's
yep.
pretty fun.
Hang on. I should have had this figured out before. Huh. Okay. I'll just make you the host, and that will give you everything.
Yeah, that works too.
Yep.
Sweet. I'll
Yep.
share the screen then.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is us at BITS Palani here with a bunch of students.
Oh.
This is our project that we are doing here. This
Yeah.
is the project that I worked on.
Hmm.
It was an augmented reality pool
Oh.
system. So it's doing this like aiming system on the pool table to show you how to shoot the pool ball.
Oh.
But it needs a projector mounted on the roof, and then
Yeah.
you've got these big checkerboard patterns to calibrate the cameras. So it was just funny because we showed up at this school, and like it's not easy to mount this huge projector
Hmm.
8 feet in the air above the pool table. It needs to be kind of stable, right?
Yeah.
So then like suddenly us and all these students were trying to figure out like how we're gonna do this. We're like connecting it to the roof or something. And oh, by the way, all of this is like 3 a.m. in the morning for some reason.
Ooh.
I have no idea why. It was pretty funny. There was also a whole bunch of people. There's a picture down here. They had a sweet Counter-Strike 1.6 LAN party going on
Oh,
that I also joined in with for a bit. It was a wild trip. So this was, I would say, definitely one of the experiences that really wanted me to travel more and just keep going to all these crazy places in the world. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah. So I think when you came in India, that was our college festival season. They call it
Yes,
that.
that's it.
Yeah. So we have all of these fests, and there are tons of technical talks. Then there are the games, and basically everyone is just trying to have a lot of fun. So and maybe that reminds me, maybe the reason for that is ki, here in India we don't really have that big of a nightlife or things for youngsters to do directly. So we don't have bowling alleys. There are very few things which you can do. You can go out, but yeah. So maybe that is the reason we have all of these college festivals. So, do you guys have that as well in Toronto or in?
We definitely have events like that. I mean, Reading Week, people just leave school as fast as possible. They need a break.
Yeah.
And we have very similar events that happen at other times throughout the year, not usually for like a full week, but I remember a lot of times we have like a 2-day thing where, engineering projects were wrapping
mm,
up and everyone was in like the foyer of a building with all their
mm,
projects set up. So
mm, mm.
we do very similar things.
Hey, and so you were when you your grad school education that was in Canada?
Yeah, yeah. I went to, it's called Queen's University. I did both my undergrad and my graduate school there.
Oh, and how about college? Because right now there is this sentiment, कि college is not worth it. But when you look back, you are pretty enthusiastic about it, right? You don't. It is not something you regret doing or something you wish you did not do. So, what do you think about that? कि were the education loans maybe were they worth it, or what are your general views?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've actually changed my opinion on that a couple times.
Hmm.
Because certainly for like when you look at the time investment and
Hmm.
the cost
Hmm.
based on what you actually learn in classes,
Hmm.
I definitely see why people question the value there.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was certainly the time in my life when I learned a lot of important things, but a lot
Hmm.
of that was self-driven and the
Yeah.
project, and also just a lot of the other people who were at school at that time.
Hmm.
Like the environment that is created at university is
Hmm.
potentially more valuable than the actual classes that you take.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, but there's certainly something to it, and of
Hmm.
course there's like been a big push that you can like self-teach yourself
Hmm.
coding, and you can
Hmm.
definitely become an
Hmm.
effective coder
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
I definitely believe that is
Hmm.
possible,
Hmm.
but I don't knock fundamental education either. And
Hmm.
I've noticed as I've gotten deeper into my career that I think I've found more value in like my traditional education than I did when I first started.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Hmm.
I think I also had the opportunity of working with a couple of engineers at various times that
hmm.
like I've worked with a lot of self-taught engineers who are fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I've worked with some self-taught engineers that were not fantastic, but then
Hmm.
were really proud of the fact they were self-taught. And that kind of really bugged me. It's
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
you just broke everything. Like maybe don't yell that you're so proud that you're self-taught now, because like it's not going super well.
But so what are the crucial parts of computer science which they taught you in school? Because right now here everything they are teaching college kids is pretty useless. That may be a
Yeah.
little harsh because they are teaching algorithms, they are teaching data structures. Those are the two useful subjects. Then they are teaching basics of databases, but that is like a 4-hour thing, right? If you put yourself together and you consume all of the content, then in about 4 or 6 hours you will have a general idea of what databases are. And then the rest of the stuff which they have even for computer science and IT curriculums, it is just okay, so they are trying to teach you how to do this one specific thing. They are not trying to teach you how to fish. So they are trying to teach you how to build a e-commerce site using this and that. That might be C sharp or React or something similar. The focus is not on how to build websites or how to build services. So if that was the case, then they might have taught a little bit about containers, maybe how the architectural system design part works. Instead they just pick something and then just deep dive into that, if that makes sense. Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. That's tough. I'm not really a great person to ask about that because my path through education was kind of
Yeah.
odd. Like I
Yeah.
did the mechanical engineering, which had a
Hmm.
lot more like engineering
Hmm.
fundamentals, and then I
Hmm.
kind of self-taught myself some programming, and
Yeah.
then did the masters and did so I
Yeah.
did like a bunch of like grad
Hmm.
courses
Hmm.
and like
Hmm.
fourth year kind of courses. Like I did a computer graphics course
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Ha.
pattern recognition, which was
Yeah.
really deep theory on those like parts that I found
Exactly.
interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't really
Exactly.
go through those other courses. It's kind of like, this is a database. It's like, yeah, when I need a database, I'll go read about it, right? So I don't know. Like I've actually often wondered, like, would I actually like computer science as much as I do if I'd done a full degree in it? Because some of those courses sound pretty boring.
Exactly. So that's my point of interest. Uh, e- what are the parts of college education that we truly value? I mean, you
Yeah.
talked about self-taught developers, but maybe those self-taught developers should have read about better things, right? So they could be better self-taught developers. So maybe I guess that is the difference. I think you are totally a self-taught developer. I mean, web development stuff, I don't think they taught you that, right? You did it all on your own, basically.
Yeah. I
So
think the best way that schools can go about it is to
mm,
like create the best environment for people
mm,
to be like self-taught correctly.
yeah,
So like have your database course, but don't
mm,
make the assignment take 10 hours. Make it kind of easy, just like
mm,
enough to get your feet wet. And
yeah,
then set people off on more interesting projects so
mm,
that when they encounter a problem in that project, they're like, oh, I think the database should be for this. Because
yeah,
if someone's
exactly.
never told you about a database, then you're going to have a hard time making that connection. But if someone has like forced you to rebuild a database
Mm,
for an entire semester, I don't really know if there's like that much value in that, because even when you encounter these problems that are important to understand, you might not understand why they're important to understand. Like I can think about, I can remember feeling this. I can't remember the
mm,
exact circumstance,
mm,
but I can
mm.
remember remembering problems that I was like, yeah, I remember being told about this years ago, and I really didn't care at the time. But now I actually kind of understand why that's important.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's hard to motivate, and that's kind of what school is missing a lot of the time, is like the context and why you should care.
Exactly, exactly. So I think a best way might be a flipped curriculum where you first build sites and you encounter the problems and then you are taught how to solve those problems.
Mhm.
That might be a very difficult way to structure a curriculum, a lopsided and a head first, tail first way. But so sometimes, you right now, where I am in the AI stuff, I am at a point where um, you know I depend on a lot of libraries and sometimes something breaks, and at that point we don't know what should I go back to. And in times like these, the theory might come in handy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's also experience comes in handy there too, because
Oh
the
yeah.
unfortunate matter, well, I find there's always a question of like,
Mm.
how are we going to solve this, right? Some strange thing has broken. Like,
Yeah.
do we need to fix that exact thing? Should
Yeah.
we be stepping back and like removing this whole piece?
Hmm.
And there's like a whole effort calculation that always goes in my head now. Be like, it might take me 5 days to figure
Yeah.
out what this stack trace was.
Yeah.
It might only take me or it might take me 2 days to just replace it.
Yeah.
Like I might find it quicker,
Yeah.
or I could just replace it. And like, I don't actually know if that thought process is correct or
Hmm.
healthy, but
Hmm.
like, that's
Hmm.
always where my brain goes. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man, that's gonna be so nasty to fix. Is there
Yeah.
just an easier way to not fix this? And sometimes that works out really well, and sometimes I feel like maybe that's the wrong way to think. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was the thing I learned from you. So when you came into the company, I was just doing a lot of things on my own, and those were not very optimum ways of approaching those specific problems. Those might have been the ways to approach that problem in general, but in the context of the company, that software, that time, and that budget, maybe those were not the correct ones. And that was where you came in and you were like, no, Rohan, do it this way. uh, uh, or doing the correct thing right now might actually be the wrong thing. Instead of building this correctly, you should focus on this part and build that differently. It is hard to put into words, but
Yeah, it's
yeah.
all a sequence, and then these things, like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really tough, and
Yeah.
you kind of get a strategy that works for you, but it's important that everyone keeps thinking, because
Yeah.
sometimes the strategy that sounds smart just takes you in a really wrong way, or
Yeah.
you have no idea. It's
Yeah.
also really fun too to check back on stuff that you've done years later and kind of see how it turned out. Um, I was working on that pool project again
Yeah.
for a bit,
Yeah.
and at the time there was a whole complicated set of things that you went through to calibrate it,
Yeah.
and I had changed it to use some, there was like a number of C++ executables and some bash scripts to kind of tie it together and make it look like one thing. And I was not a very good bash scripter. I'm honestly still not a very good
Yeah.
bash scripter.
Yeah.
And just to see how that pattern had evolved in like 5 years of my absence, I was like, oh boy, this got real bad. So I ended up fixing it, which felt kind of cool to fix a mistake of my own that had just like festered for 5 years. But back when I originally wrote it, it wasn't that bad. It was actually just like the smallest little script to kind of glue these things together and give some idea of like, you need to run it in this order, but not necessarily making it all one massive C++ program, because that was causing problems.
Yeah.
But then later on, this like bash thing had kind of grown on its own. And there was some other weird stuff about like, I hadn't really figured out a good way to work around relative paths too. So there's this weird relative pathing problem because we needed to like save files. So the bash scripts had some important kind of obtuse code to make sure that all the pathing stuff stayed correct. And everyone else just blindly copied it. It still worked, but like it had grown well beyond the point of needing like a proper solution to where the paths should be. And now like in my job doing more infrastructure and managing servers, like I have a much better concept of how to manage paths from the get-go. But me at that point had really only learned how to write C++ and had no idea. I was like, this is really annoying. I just want this to work all the time.
So you know, when we are building code, there is this point where we don't know how to maybe use bubble sort. So we use a weird sort, and then everyone just comes in and copies the same thing, and it just becomes a behemoth. That is exactly what that sounds like. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna go refill my coffee, and then we should jump back on the traveling, thread.
Great way. That would be a great way for an intermission. Yep, sure.
Sounds good. I'll be right back.
Yep.
All right.
And we are back.
Caffeine.
Yep.
Right. So we got distracted on another tangent of coding. It's probably going to happen again because we're both
that's
coders.
okay. That's okay. So we just talk. So before I came on this call, I was worried we will just have to stare at each other's faces for 30 seconds, and there would be awkward pauses. But nah, this is way better. So I thought of a really interesting question to ask you.
Okay.
So you were at the toppest point on the globe thingy somewhere, and then you were at the bottommost point on the Earth continents. So I think you were the bottommost point. What was that? The southernmost tip of.
Oh yes. So that was kind of the first leg of our trip.
Yep.
Was we went all the way down to like almost the southernmost tip of South America.
Yeah.
Which is the Patagonia region of kind of Chile and Argentina. The border kind of like slices right in the middle. We didn't technically go to the most southern point, which is Ushuaia, which is a town there. Its claim to fame is that it's the most southern inhabitable part on that island, not that island, on South America.
Yeah.
Actually, it is an island, sorry. Ushuaia is on an island at the very tip of South America, and it is. But we hung out in a bunch of other towns that were like the next most southern, because there was some stuff we really wanted to do there. We stayed in El Chalten, which is the town at the base of the Fitzroy mountain range, which, if you're familiar with the company Patagonia, the brand.
Nope.
It's a popular outdoor clothing brand in North America called Patagonia, and their logo is actually that mountain range at the base of this town.
Oh, I see. And then what was the northernmost point of your endeavors? White.
I actually think the northernmost point was probably where we started in Canada. I don't think we went more north than where we came from. But that was one thing that I thought was really cool, was like I've been a lot of places and I've traveled far. Like India was probably, like I've been to both India and China, which are both very far in like a straight vector sense from Canada. But they feel far, but they feel far for different reasons. And when we were in the tip of South America, it felt really far from home. And the only thing that I could come up with to kind of explain that was that it was like a single line over land. Like we could have driven there. So it was like a more relatable distance, if that makes sense. Whereas like India or China, you get on a plane for an ungodly amount of time and suddenly you're there and it's this different world. Whereas the most southern part of South America, like we traveled directly down, kind of hopping. So like the distance felt really real.
Hey, and I just checked. So what I have on this screen is I have your website, that is kevinandsam.travel/map. So I'm just looking at that, and I think the topmost point is Scotland,
Okay.
Sheltland in Scotland. Yeah.
Scotland beats out Ottawa. I would actually be interested if it's actually more north or if that is just a relic of the like map distortion algorithm, but that would certainly be kind of like equivalent.
Yeah. That is mind blowing, actually. Yeah.
Yo, the map distortion thing is super real, let me tell you. Have you heard of this? They call it a conspiracy. It's not
Yeah.
really a
Go on. Go
conspiracy.
on. Go on.
I forget the name. What is the projection? Okay, like
Orthogonal.
the what?
Orthogonal projection. Is that what they call it?
That is a projection. I'm thinking of a specific one. There's like a bunch of different strategies on how people take the globe and try to like map it to a flat map that we look at. And they're like the default one, like the one that Google Maps uses, and pretty much all of the online maps. It has a very specific name, and as the result of it, it ends up seriously compressing Africa on the map, because Africa's kind of in the center, so it's like way bigger, and it like pushes it kind of in on itself. The conspiracy is called the True Size of Africa conspiracy, and there's actually some really cool online visualizations of different map projections. I've seen one where what you can do is you can click on a country and you can drag it, and as you move it around the globe, it reprojects it. So that kind of lets you do a comparison like 1-to-1 on what things are. Because I think also Russia looks way bigger on the projection than it actually is. There's a whole bunch of really weird stuff, but it's super true, and I got totally burned by it in Africa because I was using that map on my travel blog. I quasi use that as like a planning tool because I don't know, I'm weird, and as we were roaming around the world, I wanted it. Like when we were gonna go someplace, I wanted our route to kind of make sense. I didn't want to like backtrack. That seemed wasteful.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably the whole trip was not particularly sustainable, but backtracking just seemed really stupid. So I didn't want to backtrack. And I wanted, if we were going to roam through some place, it needed to make sense for me. And I also wanted the map to look nice. And it was useful to plan too, because behind that, there's all the dates, and there was that form where you could pick a time to come visit us, and it would tell us where you were, where we were going to be, so that if our friends were like, a couple of our friends would come visit us as we were roaming around, and they'd know. So it'd be like, oh, I'm thinking about taking a vacation in September, and they just click September, and the website be like, yeah, we're going to be kind of around here in Europe or something, right? So I use it as a planning tool as well to kind of like pick out, so we could figure out when we need flights and where we would need to be staying. So I was planning out our portion of our trip in Namibia, which is a country in Africa. And we had done our kind of standard thing where we read up online, usually kind of a combination of TripAdvisor. Lonely Planet has really good guides. That was kind of my favorite starting point to get a loose idea of kind of where we should go and research further from there. And they had this cool route that said, here, this is like a 15-day Namibia itinerary. You pick up your car in Windhoek, and then you drive up to Etosha National Park. And then from there, you come down the coast, and then you go, we went all the way down this abandoned sand dunes. Anyway, so this itinerary sounded really cool. We're like, yeah, we're just gonna like drive a square around Namibia. It's gonna be great. And for whatever reason, I just naively plotted this on my own map. It was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like this is what the route does. It just goes around the country. This is fine. This is pretty sweet. We'll like see all these things. This is awesome. Never looked at any of the individual distances. So then we got our car, pumped it into our GPS, and it's like, yeah, Windhoek to Etosha National Park is like 600 kilometers. We're like, oh, what? That's huge. That's gonna take us like 8 or 9 hours. And then we were only, our rental car, like all the roads there are kind of dirt roads, and you're basically off-roading it, right? So we got the extended package, which gave us 3 spare tires. And then even then, they had pretty strict guidelines for tourists on how fast you were allowed to drive on each road. And it wasn't that fast. The maximum speed they were like technically allowing you to do was 80 kilometers an hour. So it's like, we got to drive 600 kilometers an hour at a maximum speed of 80 kilometers an hour. It's like 8 hours of driving a day. And then we like look up the next day and we're like 700 kilometers, 800. Oh my God. Turns out in the 15 days we were there, we drove over 5,000 kilometers.
Oh, damn.
It was crazy. I mean, it was cool. We saw the whole country,
Yeah.
but I would probably have changed things if I'd been aware that we were going to drive 5,000 kilometers before we set out.
So why didn't you take the bus? Is bus not an option in Africa?
I think there are places where you can bus around, and we definitely did prefer to take bus. Namibia, just that's how most people do it. The buses don't really go up there. And then when we were in like Etosha National Park was it's a reserve. There's animals there, and that's why you go there is to go and do safaris. But we did our own safari. Like we drove our own truck around, which that's what everyone said to do. And at first we were terrified. We're like, this sounds like such a bad idea.
Yeah.
Best idea we ever did. We enjoyed our safari in Namibia so much more. We did another one later on in Tanzania, and it was still great. But the ability to drive yourself around is so much fun, and we just really liked it because like you do what you want to do, and if you don't have to like explain what you want to do. I remember there's this one of the best pictures I took of this elephant standing by a tree in the middle of the desert. We drove like the full circle looking for the best angle of this photograph. Like, try telling that to your safari guide. Like you're gonna annoy them so much. Like, can you just drive over there? How about just drive over there? How about just over there? Here's good. It's just so much better. So we really enjoyed being able to do it on our own and then just have full control. And the other advantage too is Namibia was a much better on the budget than other safaris in Tanzania and stuff.
Hey, so take me through it. So what car were you driving, and did you do all of the driving? Was it mostly through the jungles? And just take me through the details. I'm really interested.
Yeah. So it was a big truck. It was a 4x4 truck with 4 spare tires in the back and a bunch of camping gear that we also rented. We had a tent that was mounted on the roof of our truck that we could kind of collapse or expand. So we actually slept on top of our truck most of the time, just in campgrounds. I did all the driving because it was a manual transmission, and my girlfriend's, I mean, she can kind of drive stick, but not really. So I did pretty much all the driving. And Namibia is actually mostly a desert. It's actually pretty much all desert. So we drove all the way up to Etosha, where there was a bunch of animals in the park there. Just explored around there, and usually what you're doing is you're driving between watering holes. We had a map where all the watering holes are, and then you drive to each watering hole, and that's where all the animals are going to hang out and drink water for the day. And then every once in a while you see something pretty cool on the way to a watering hole. Those are kind of your destinations, if you will.
So
and then
go on. Sorry, no.
Ask your question. I was going to move on to another section.
Okay. So so you are basically driving in this wildlife reserve when all the way through Africa?
Well, so we drove all the way up, and then the reserve was like sectioned at the top, and then we drove to other places where we saw other things. From the wildlife reserve, we drove all the way out to the coast, and we drove down the coast, which is this really kind of bizarre desert, and there was nobody else out there. It felt like we were on Mars almost. It was wild. That's when we got our first flat tire. It's coming into it was called Skeleton Coast. So we got a flat tire right as we arrived at Skeleton Coast, learned how to change a flat tire. Got another flat tire the next day leaving Skeleton Coast. So at this point we were a little concerned because we only had one tire left. And then we arrived at a town on the coast. The name of that one is escaping me, but we were able to get another flat tire. We were able to get another spare there, and we continued down the coast to the other. This is the other main famous thing in Namibia is what is the park called? It's a red sand dune national park. I know that the end of it is called Sasafle and the Dead Trees, where there's this really cool kind of like cracked mud, white ground with these dead trees that come up.
The photos, the one we see in the photos, the pictures.
It's a very famous place to take photography. So we hung out there for a bit and saw the red dunes. Then we went a little bit further down the coast to Shark Cove or something.
Yeah.
And there we visited this German mining town that had been totally abandoned and just filled in with sand. Super bizarre, exploring like a ghost town just full of sand. We were there later on in the day after it was closed, but you could go visit it if you had a photography permit, which is like twice as expensive as the normal entry fee, which was kind of annoying, but it ended up being awesome because there's no one else there. So we got like the true ghost town experience, just walking around on our own. So I think it was definitely worth the extra cost.
So what happens if you break down in the middle of Africa? What happens then?
We had a WhatsApp group to the company that we rented the car from, which sounds sketchy, but honestly, they were on top of it. They responded right away. And WhatsApp is actually pretty great for that, right? Because you get the little double check mark if the message has been received. So it's like, hey, message has been received. They're sending someone to help us out. We had honestly an excellent experience dealing with our car there.
And you had a network connection, data connection in Africa?
Yeah, I got a SIM card in Namibia, and I believe it worked most places pretty well. Yeah,
surprising.
I got a little bag of all the SIM cards that I got in every country we went to, so I kept them all. I was thinking I was going to make some sort of, I don't know, display of them or something, like a map of the world of SIM cards pinned in. We'll see.
Yeah. So this was, when was this in your itinerary? Was it at the beginning, the middle, or the end, Africa?
Africa was kind of right in the middle, I think. Yeah, we did, the loose order was South America, Europe, Africa, Asia.
Let's talk about Asia. That is something I'm familiar with. I'm there.
So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So where did you start it?
So we flew to, so after Africa, we flew back home and we stayed here to kind of just visit family for like 10 days. We're back. And that was around fall, which is going into winter in Japan and Korea. So we flew to Korea first because we needed to get the most northern countries out of the way before it got too cold. And then we kind of moved our way down from there. So we flew to Korea and we spent about 2 weeks in Korea. And then we went to Japan. And then I think we went to Vietnam. Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, and then Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos, and Myanmar.
Oh, so I guess that is where I met you during the last hop of your journey. You were traveling through the jungles of Malaysia, I think, when we met. So
yeah, I definitely I started doing. I didn't really touch a computer very much for the first couple of months, like in South America. I really didn't touch a computer all that often. And then by the end of it, I needed a little bit of a break. I was kind of burnt out from my first professional sprint. And then by Asia again, I was like, I'm like back into computers. Let's do some computer work.
And a funny incident I just remembered. So when Kevin was doing all of this, I first met him and I was like, hey, so we are about to work together. Let's jump on a video call. And he was like, let's not do that because I'm in middle of nowhere. And at that time, it did not occur to me what was going on behind the scenes. So yeah, pretty interesting.
That is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I think I was on a very, one of my favorite places in the world, actually. Tonsai Beach in Thailand. We were doing a lot of rock climbing there, but the internet was a bit sparse. I could kind of only really get it on my phone if I walked to like certain cafes. And it was reliable enough to work on, but calls were not the best.
Yeah. So now let's come to the, how did you fund all of this? This seems massive. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, it was something, so I guess backing way up to like, this has kind of been an idea that had been in my mind, something I really wanted to do, something I wanted to do when I was younger, because you can kind of like rough it more, and that is beneficial. As you get older, you require more luxury, I guess. so and then also that was something that my girlfriend and I shared.
mm,
She had also traveled a lot,
mm,
and we
mm,
started traveling together. And
mm, mm,
every time we went traveling, we would
mm,
meet people who were traveling for a lot longer
mm,
than we
mm,
were.
mm,
And we were always the people that were doing a 2-week vacation, and we
mm,
were always meeting all these other nomads and types who are like, yeah, I'm like traveling for like a couple months. I don't know, I'm going to go home. And we just really
mm,
like, fell in love with that idea.
mm, mm,
So we kind of always talked about doing it. We had like,
mm.
we were saving money to go and do that. And then I like the startup that I was working for
Mm.
went public. So that kind
Oh,
of gave us a bit of a boost to our savings.
yeah.
And then I decided that I was kind of like, I needed a break from
Mm,
work.
mm,
And that's kind of when we started focusing in on the
yeah.
timeline of when we were going to go and do
Mm,
that.
mm, mm.
And we took off. The actual
Oh,
funding,
mm.
you can check out online. A lot of people like have better blog posts talking about the
Yeah,
finances of
yeah,
long-term
yeah,
traveling than I have. Like
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
popular topic.
That's fine.
There's like
Nah, nah, that's fine. I
chasing
just wanted to
budget,
know
but
about you. I
yeah.
just wanted to know about you. So yeah,
The
and
reality is though, like honestly, it's more expensive to just live in Canada than it is to travel around a lot of the time. Just
but
like rent,
yeah.
basically rent.
But you also need a remote job, right? So to manage all of that. So once you have
Yeah.
that, then you can move around. Yep.
Yeah, that's so totally makes a big difference. Yeah,
Mm, mm,
the ability to freelance and keep working while we were on the road
mm,
was huge,
mm, mm,
because otherwise you have to like keep drawing onto your savings to kind of like
mm,
it changes
mm.
the equation a
Yeah,
little bit. So
exactly. Yep.
I really recommend that. The
Mm,
digital nomad thing has gotten really popular as of
mm,
late,
mm, mm.
and I think that's really cool because I think
Yeah,
traveling is really like an awesome thing to be able to do.
yeah, yeah.
And even just traveling in your own country and doing
Mm,
other stuff is like
of
really
course.
valuable. So I'm really glad that remote work is
Mm.
becoming more popular. I mean, COVID now, everyone's pretty much working remote. I don't know what it's like in India, but
Yeah.
in Canada, most people are working remotely now.
Yeah.
It's kind of changed.
Same here. Everyone is
Changed
remote.
a lot.
Everything is remote.
Yeah.
And okay, so another question. Mm, what were some romantic ideas that you had before you started traveling, and those just collapsed when you were actually traveling? And what were some of the things which you thought were not as romantic, but those turned out to be the best ones?
That's a tough question.
Yeah. So
I
I'll maybe
might
just
twist it a little
sorry.
bit.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, like there's a lot of things that are different
Mm,
between traveling for that long and
mm,
traveling for more of a typical vacation,
mm.
because it is your life.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think something that you think romantic is like not working and just doing whatever you want every day is going to
Yeah.
like automatically make you happy.
Mm,
But it doesn't really work that way.
yeah.
And you still have to like put in the effort to like
Mm,
be happy and like go and find all these things to do. And yeah, it's not like an automatic like change, if
yeah.
that makes sense. And then
Yeah.
the other thing that can get really difficult that you don't really expect
Yeah.
is that you kind of have this like guilt, I guess, or like you should be
Ah,
having fun every day because you
yeah.
took a year off to go
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
travel and experience the world.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that sometimes you just need to stay in your house and watch Netflix all
Yeah,
day. Right?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Makes sense.
So
Yeah.
it's a really weird mindset to be in when you're like, I'm in this really cool country. I've definitely not experienced anywhere close to like
Hmm.
enough of it,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
need a day off. So it was really
Yeah.
hard to give yourself the permission to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, like, especially too, because you end up getting really like aware of all these like different countries and stuff. So sometimes you're just in a kind of expensive place. I
Hmm.
remember one day we just like did nothing. We were in Vienna, Austria, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
just like, this is a really stupid place just to be watching Netflix. But you know, you need
Yeah.
the day off. So you
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
to
You
do
do. You
that.
do. Yeah.
So that was something that we were kind of, we had like the notion that we were going to have to figure this out,
Yeah.
but we had no idea exactly what it was
Yeah.
going to be like. So that was certainly like that. And then yeah, it's just when you're on a 2-week vacation, it's really easy to love everything that you do.
Mm,
You're really excited about it.
mm,
And then
mm.
sometimes you end up feeling kind of like you go and you do something that should have been really fun. You're just like, yeah, it was cool. It was whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, it's kind of, then you feel bad. You're like, I
Yeah.
just had like a meh reaction to this thing that I did. It's like most people would be so stoked about this.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard to like manage some of that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
then like 2 years later, you just look back and you're like, yeah, everything was great.
Yeah.
You don't remember that you were kind
Oh.
of like
So
moping about some
yeah.
stuff.
So you had just the memories. So the time you travel, it becomes a giant box kind of thing. So you have this, we did that, and you don't remember the specifics of it, but you remember how it started, the middle, the end, and then the that emotion wraps all around it. So if you had great times, it was great, you had no complaints. Yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're I think we're really, really good as humans at forgetting crappy stuff that we don't want to regret.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
makes it weird to look back, but
Yeah.
not that anything was crappy, but yeah,
Yeah.
when I look back at the experience now, it was amazing. I would not change anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm glad I still remember some of the kind of reflections I had in the middle of it that made it a weird
Hmm.
experience too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and okay. So, did you guys have a, deadline of sorts when you were moving around these places, of how you wanted to go about it?
Um, Not like really. We kind of, even when we travel just for
Hmm.
short periods of time, we kind of like to
Hmm.
just go with the flow and not book too far in advance.
Hmm.
I think usually we were only had like one accommodation
Hmm.
ahead of where we were currently booked,
Hmm. Hmm.
currently staying planned out,
Hmm.
and then occasionally we'd have a flight a little bit
Hmm.
further out
Hmm.
in the future. We had a couple of harder things we need to constrain to. One of my girlfriend's best friends was planning to meet us in
Ooh.
Croatia.
Hmm.
So we knew like, well, we need to be in Croatia on this day
Yeah.
or else
Yeah.
she's going to be real mad at us.
Yeah.
And then we didn't have a super finite end period
Hmm.
either. We just kind of went until we decided that we were done, but we knew like
Hmm.
loosely a year and like loosely
Yeah.
this orientation. I mean, actually, we ended up leaving after we did Southeast Asia,
Hmm.
and because originally we had planned to go back to India because my
Hmm.
girlfriend's never been there. I also really wanted to go to Nepal.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we didn't get there.
Hmm.
So we're planning to do a big trip to India at some point. One
Yes,
of
you
our
have
favorite.
you have a couch to crash on. You can sleep on my bed.
Right on. Might take you up
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, exactly. I believe you. And okay, so your site, you were talking about this site which had to plan, your travel and then come visit us pages. So that
Mhm.
might be a very difficult thing to build, right? The site.
Um, yeah, it wasn't actually too bad. It was well, it drew on a couple of things that I've been like playing around with for a while. I've been
Yeah.
playing around a bunch of like map APIs.
Yeah.
I had this map project that I was working on for Ultimate Frisbee to draw
Hmm.
like fields on Google Maps. So I've kind of been like screwing around with some map stuff for a while. So
Yeah.
the map wasn't actually that hard for me to
Hmm.
do just because I've been kind of mucking around with it.
Hmm.
Um, most of the site, it's like a static site. It's built using Gatsby and
Oh.
React.
Ha.
Um,
But this was in 2000, before 2015, right? Gatsby and React. So you built this then?
Um, no, Gatsby and React is like new. The travel site, when was I actually traveling? It was like 2018 that I was traveling, so it's pretty new.
Oh, yeah. Huh, yeah. So I think you were the one of the early adopters for the. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's on my site's still on like the 1.0 version of Gatsby, and I tried to update 2.0 and got a bunch of like really nasty looking JavaScript stack traces, and I was like, I don't care enough to update. There's no reason to update this. Site
Yeah.
works still.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then like the country list is a countries.js file, which is just like
Mm.
a flat JSON database.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And then I
Yeah.
have like a couple of like functions that slice it in
Mm.
different ways,
Mm. Mm.
um, by date or by location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Oh, and if do you think you would do this again, the traveling thing, sometime in the future?
Um, I would like traveling for a year, I think
Hmm.
is a once in a lifetime thing. That's like a really long time to go and kind of like uproot everything. Like maybe when
Yeah.
I'm really old and retired, but I don't have any immediate plans to travel for that long again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But having done it once,
Hmm.
I would definitely love to, if I could, try to do another like 3 months. Like 3 months is a really
Yeah.
good length to go and just kind of roam
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of, you can, at least for me, I found
Hmm.
that we were
Hmm.
able to maintain kind of like vacation pace for about 3 months.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then after 3 months is when it's like, yeah, like we're on the road for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even a
Yeah.
month though, like I definitely don't think that we get enough vacation in kind of the modern world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
2 week vacation is
Exactly.
pretty short. A
Yeah.
month is a lot better.
Yeah.
Um, 3 months would be cool to
Yeah.
do again.
Yeah.
Like when I'm talking about going to India, I would love to come to India for a month and then probably go to Nepal for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I've also been like always kind of interested in Bhutan.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of cool.
Hmm. Hey.
And then like the Annapurna circuit in Nepal is like a fairly long hike too, which I'd like to do.
Hmm.
So then it's like if you're gonna hike for 7 days, well then you probably need another bunch of time in Nepal to see the country properly.
Yeah. 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 And so, what do you think? According to you, how many hours a day can a guy productively work? And instead of giving people vacations for 15 days, could we, reduce the average workload to say 5 hours or 4.5 hours? And then everyone works that number of hours, and you increase maybe a day. You don't give them Saturday, Sunday off, but only Saturday off, or something like that. Because I think I cannot be productive for 8 hours. I mean, that does. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Hmm.
I'm very interested in kind of like alternative styles of work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think I first got interested in this way back when one of my first technical jobs,
Hmm.
I was working for a oil and gas company in
Hmm.
Alberta up
Hmm.
north,
Hmm.
basically just driving a truck around and making sure that their oil equipment was still functioning and still there or something. It was a weird
Okay.
job, but it worked 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and I
Yeah.
just thought that was um, the coolest arrangement because you're
Yeah.
in this trailer up in the far north in Canada. There's nothing else going on. You work 11 hours a day, which I mean you could never program 11 hours a day, but
Yeah.
this type of work that felt pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And you just went to sleep, and then you went home after 2 weeks, and then you got a 2 week vacation every 2 weeks from your job, and it was fantastic. One of the best summers of like one of the best summer jobs I ever had.
Whew.
Really cool. And then ever since then, I've just kind of continued this thought of like questioning and thinking
Yeah.
about it because yeah, I agree. I don't
Yeah.
even in my job when I like work 8 hours, I'm not coding 8 hours. A
Yeah.
lot of my job
Exactly.
is like kind of trying to get alignment on what it is that we are going to code, which I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of time ends up going
Hmm.
these days is
Hmm.
figuring out what we're going to do.
Hmm.
Whereas if we just like fix that somehow
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
just had an actual good technical list of things to do,
Hmm.
we could do that and we could just
Yeah.
work less. And I mean, when I
Yeah.
was actually working for Smart Cow,
Yeah.
that kind of proved it. That was a lot
Yeah.
more how I worked. I
Yeah.
would only work for about 3, maybe 4 hours
Yeah.
maximum ever at a time.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of had like in the back of my mind the
Yeah.
problem we were trying to solve, and
Yeah.
a lot of the ideas and stuff that I came up with were like I don't know, like walking around some town eating lunch. Oh, I bet that would be good. Maybe
Yeah.
next time I code, I'll do that. Sit down and code it, and you're like, wow, this is so effective. I actually referenced this the other day.
Yeah.
Um, we're having a bit of a discussion at my current company about
Hmm.
working hours
Hmm.
and maybe going to a 4-day work week. A couple people pushing
Hmm.
for it.
Hmm.
I would love a 4-day work week.
Yeah.
But for someone younger, though, that does make a lot of sense that maybe you would rather, and when I was younger, I totally thought that too, that I would rather just code 4 or 5 hours every day
Hmm.
and then have a lot more free time every day to do
Hmm.
other things.
Hmm.
I'm really hoping that we do get
Hmm.
a better kind of framework figured out for this.
Yeah.
And like, the pandemic seems to be kind of helping people
Yeah.
question a lot of these defaults we just had
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but I really agree with that part. Ki, when you used to work, it was like I would just pile on all of these issues for you, GitHub issues, and after that I went to sleep, and the next day when I woke up, it was like the dwarfs making shoes for me. Everything was just done when I woke up, and I was like, boom, what happened? So yeah, I mean, you were super productive when you were working back there, from a single screen, a small laptop, but you were doing wonders. So yeah, I totally agree. Most of the stuff is just in here, in your brain. You have to just think about it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Say you were too. We actually had a pretty good flow there for those
Yeah.
couple of weeks because
Yeah.
yeah, just like that. It was like go to sleep, wake up. It was just like stuff was getting done. It was
Yeah.
pretty awesome. There was just the two of us
Yeah.
coordinating, which really
Yeah.
speaks to the coordination being kind of where I think a lot of effort is getting lost in a lot
Yeah.
of software development these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, the coordination, the alignment, and like the what are we actually going to do part of it, and not the let's do the part of it thing.
Yeah. Okay. So this makes sense. See, what used to happen was, I used to open issues before I went to sleep, and then you saw them on your phone, and then you thought about those overnight, and in the morning you were ready to code. Now in normal office hours, what happens, you get an issue at 9 in the morning, you work on it till 11, then from 11 till 5 you have to, have lunch, get over the drowsiness you get after lunch, and then get back to working, and that takes a toll on you, I guess. So yeah, that makes sense actually. Yep.
Yeah, it was pretty cool times to just
Yeah.
do that.
Yep.
And
And
just
all.
all
Yeah.
with people I just met on the internet.
Yeah.
There was that one time we finally had a call,
Yeah.
and I realized it was the first time that I'd either seen like you or Ravi's face
Yeah.
ever. Like
Yeah.
bizarre.
And you had been working with Ravi since a longer time than that, right? And you just
Yeah,
met him.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, pretty
yeah.
funny.
It was pretty funny.
We met when you came back in Canada and bought your house. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Okay, so on that great note, I think we can conclude. Right. So this was a
Sure.
lot of fun, and I had a great time. So any closing statements, Kevin?
No, this was super fun. It was a good chat. I hope your podcast is a tech podcast because we spent
Ah,
most of the
nah.
time talking about technology.
Nah, it is the name of the, oh my god, I did not say the name of the podcast. Okay. So the, yeah, so the name of the podcast is the Rohan and Max podcast. So Max is my co-podcaster, and I am Rohan, and we just have this thing. And and when I spoke to Max, sorry, when I spoke to Max, I asked him, hey, so what kind of questions should I ask Kevin, and what should we talk about? He was like, just talk for an hour, and that's it. So yeah. Yeah,
Mission accomplished.
yeah, mission accomplished. And just, and this is the longest we have ever spoken, me and Kevin. But
Yes,
yeah.
this is actually the
Yeah.
longest we've ever spoken.
Yeah, but this was, I mean, I really had a great evening, and I hope you had a great morning as well. Yep.
Definitely. This was
Yeah.
awesome. Good luck
Yep.
with your podcast.
Yeah.
Stay safe in India
Yeah.
with the pandemic and everything in
Yeah.
this crazy new world where everything
Yeah.
is changing, but
Yeah.
hopefully for the better when it's all said and done.
Yeah. And hey, you are invited for my couch. If you
Sounds
ever
good. If you ever
Yeah.
find yourself in Canada, you're also invited to my
Yes.
couch.
Yep.
Actually, we have a guest bedroom, so we can put you up there.
Oh, nice. Fancy. Okay. So I guess we will conclude. And if you want to know more about Kevin, we will have some of the links up here, up there. Yeah.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, take
Okay.
it easy, buddy.
Great. Bye.
Bye.